Hello, my name's Tom Carhill. The date is the 17th of October 2013. I'm going to make a quick video about letters of comfort and also guarantors letters. Letters of comfort are a type of guarantors letter. Now, you may or may not be familiar with the concept of limited companies, PLCs, etc., but if you are or you aren't, the whole thing is that often you get a company, it's got a name, it's got a branding, and then that company may well have lots of subsidiaries who all use the same branding, and but effectively they're not actually part of the main company. So this is often the case. Now, for instance, you might have Tesco's Thailand, you might have Tesco's England. They might be separate companies, and in fact, if they're in different countries, they will have different corporate entities in those countries because there'll be different laws about incorporating a company in those countries. So, for instance, if it's cross-jurisdictional, the chances are they will be actually separate companies in each country. But then again, it could be split down a lot more than that. Now, having said that, I'm going to say the exact opposite, in that there's no reason why, if you've got a company that is in charge of fishing fish out of the sea, that could also own a car yard. It could be part of the same company, so they could do fishing, and they could also fix cars or sell cars. It could be part of the same company, but more often than not, or often, there'll be separate companies. Now, like I've said, they may or may not be taking advantage of the same branding, or they may be taking advantage of not using the same branding. So, for instance, let's just say it's in one country. You've got a holding company, might be a PLC, might be a limited company. There's different rules for PLCs and limited companies. It's a bit more strict for PLCs. But one of the things is, because of the FSA, we have the FSA in England, that's the Financial Services, Financial Services Agency, I forget what it is. The point is, the FSA are useless. They're the most useless organisation going. They're a very useless government organisation, pseudo public sector, I suppose, or maybe fully public sector, I'm not exactly sure. The point is, there was a company called Square Mile Securities, right? And the FSA, normally they say that company's okay, that company's not, stay away from that company, use that company. Now, in this instance, very rare, they guaranteed this company, said, oh, this is a good company. So they actually gave it like a little gold star, if you use like primary school terms, which I think is appropriate when you're talking about an organisation that, is part of the civil service, not more so than the FSA. Right, so they gave this company a little gold star, said, put your money in there. Now, I came across this guy. He'd basically... He wasn't a rich man, but he'd amassed over his life more than £1 million, maybe 2 or 3 million. And he was an accountant, a clever guy. But the point is, being an accountant is a bit straight down the line. Didn't have the sort of sense to think it's civil service, it's bollocks. He didn't understand that. He didn't understand not to trust the civil service, not to trust the government. They're not your friends. Anyway, this guy saw this little gold star that the FSA had given this Square Mile Security, put loads of money into it, and it was just a big, massive fucking Ponzi scheme. Lots of children from Essex, didn't go to university, anything like that. They were just in there, sell. It was a boiler room, and they were selling all this land or something. Anyway, it all fell down to nothing because it was all based on absolutely nothing. So the FSA had looked at it, thought that looks good, and it wasn't good. So the thing is, though, they had a kind of little caveat, because they said, well, we do insure anything that's under the FSA auspices of our kind of remit, we say is okay, we will insure you. But this one, they didn't just insure it. They'd actually said it was a particularly good one. Now, but there's a cap on the insurance. I think it was £34,000 or £35,000. So they said this firm was all right. This guy got £35,000, £34,000, lost all his other money, had no comeback on them. So they're just quite happy to just, it's not their money, it's public money. So these civil servants do not trust them. Anyway, moving on. So you've got to remember, you can't trust the financial services institutions to help you with anything. They're not your friends. They're not the police. They're not a sort of a version of the police. They're not like customs and excise. They're not going to come down knocking someone's door down. They're not going to do anything. You can put anything in front of them. They're just going to, if there's some kind of impropriety, it's going to take them years to do anything about it. So if you're criminally minded, if you can always stick things into these regulatory spheres, you've got brainless civil servants. They've got no pride motivator. They don't give a fuck whether they do a good job or not. If they work for the civil service, that's drummed out of you. They don't have any concept of profit motivation. It doesn't matter whether they tell you the wrong thing all the time. It's a bottomless pit of cash for them. They get paid very, very well. They get paid hundreds of grands to work there, a lot of them. They don't have to do anything. They get to do lots of working from home, they get all this stuff. It's a complete scam. So don't trust any of these big organisations. Same with any regulator, like the legal ombudsman. The guy who runs that gets a few hundred grand. It's a complete con. Any of these things, just do not trust them. Anyway, moving on. Letters of comfort and guarantors letters, and you'll realise why I'm so negative about these organisations, because they allow this to happen. Right, if you've got a company and you get your accounts audited by an accountant, like, I'm not talking about what colloquially is called an audit, colloquially, I mean a proper full audit. Now, if I've had a limited company in the past, and basically what the accountant does is he just says, right, well, we'll say you can spend this much on that and this much on that and this much on the other. He doesn't really look into your receipts. He trusts you to have made sure they make sense. And unless you get a tax audit from the Inland Revenue, they don't really care. It just has to sort of make sense. The numbers have to add up, but he doesn't check all your invoices. If it's a full audit, which it will be if the company's over a certain, if it does like a few hundred grand, it will have to get a full audit every year. It costs a lot more for the accountant to do it, takes a lot longer, but that accountant is putting their name to those figures. And so they can't just say, oh, well, I trusted him to tell me that was fine. It's very similar to if you get a surveyor to do a survey of a house. If that isn't okay, when he says it is okay, his insurance can get tapped up, and this is very important. Remember, their professional indemnity insurance, just like with a house surveyor, is pitched because they're taking on the risk of the fact they might make a mistake. And just like there's unknowns in certain aspects of surveying, they have to put the insurance quite high because there's certain things they can't check. It'd be too difficult. So they just put the insurance high, and they train the people quite well. So hopefully they won't get hit up too often. Often they will do. Rarely they will, but then that's taken into account, and that's why it costs so much to get a surveyor to survey your house, because it's to do with the insurance and the risk they're taking on. It's not because it's really difficult. It's not because they get paid loads of money. It's not because they're really, really highly trained. It's not that. It's a lot to do with the insurance. This is very similar to getting an accountant to sign off your books. Now, a lot of people don't realise about professional indemnity insurance and how much of an excellent thing it is to realise about, because you can actually you wouldn't believe how effective a tool it is, and how often you can actually claim on other people's insurance. People just don't realise this. They understand about it if they run into someone's car and cause like £200 of damage. They don't understand about it when it could mean like hundreds of thousands of pounds or tens of thousands of pounds, or literally life-changing amounts of money that they might have invested in something. Anyway, I know that might seem like a digression, but I'm trying to set the scene, right? If you are trying to assess the viability of a firm, and you go onto the internet and you go to a Companies House website and you try and download the Companies House accounts, and you try and look at them to see what they say. Right now, there's something you need to look out for. One thing is, often firms nowadays will get a dodgy account to just put the company's accounts house in, sign them, and it will just be complete fraud. It'll be all nonsense. He'll say they're fine, but even if you read them, you can tell they're not fine, because of the fact that the regulatory bodies at the government, they're so rubbish that they just don't even check anything. So you could put in that the company's taking in £10, let's say, that year, and it's worth £1 million. You can get accountants who will sign that off. They will sign it off, and I've got good examples of people who will do it. Or they'll, for instance, say that you've sold something, and they'll leave it as a company asset. So you've sold it to something, so you've got the money from selling it, so it will like double up the amount of money. So they'll say you sold it to another company that the same company owns, and both of them will be holding it on their books to make out they've got more money than the amount of bentness going on with accountants is quite incredible. And obviously a lot of them aren't bent, and they won't do anything even slightly snide. Yet other ones will just do absolutely anything because they know no one's ever going to hit them up for it. But you can hit them up for it, and not only them, you can hit their insurance up for it. And if it's gross negligence or criminality, and fraud, by the way, is criminality, even though a lot of people are trying to say it isn't, and the government's trying to make it a civil offence, it is crime, and it's definitely gross negligence, even when they decide it isn't crime if that happens. So you can hit their professional indemnity insurance up for it. And more importantly, The fact that they might not be insured, and they will not be insured for any crime or gross negligence, doesn't mean the insurance won't pay out. Because if you imagine, they wouldn't do very well if they were insuring loads of accountants, quantity surveyors, solicitors and sort of architects, and it turns out that they're just constantly rolling over every time someone cries foul. They just roll over and go, fuck off, we're not insuring you, you're a criminal. It won't work because a lot of professionals are criminals. So they often possibly might pay out even though they know it's a criminal matter. Now, this is the thing. Letters of comfort and guarantors letters. When you're trying to assess the viability of a firm, you look at the company's house accounts. If you see that they've got a letter of comfort, what that actually means is, that means that the accountant who signed off those accounts doesn't want to sign off the accounts because the accounts don't really make any sense. But there's a good way around that, and it's a good out, is he can say, well, can you get a parent company guarantee or a parent company guarantee, like it'd be like the parent company's owned company. Now, if this is the case, he can sign off the accounts because they've guaranteed that they'll pay out in the event that, you know, there's some problem. So if you put money into the firm, they've got a guarantor's letter, it's fine. Now, this is the point. That all sounds really, really good, doesn't it? And of course, it is good if you follow it logically. But the point is, there's a negative side to that, because why has that accountant needed the letter of comfort? It means the firm's accounts don't make any sense, because to another accountant reading it, they'll see letter of comfort, something's wrong. So you need to look at it like that and you think something is wrong. So if it's guaranteed, that's fine. Now this is where the problem comes in. Like I've said, a lot of accountants are totally negligent. They'll put negligent stuff through all the time. They don't care. Just like all professionals, they'll just do outright crime. And because of this country, white-collar criminals are endorsed and promoted by the police and the judiciary, etc., to a large extent. Not so much the judiciary, but definitely the police. They don't like going around with the sirens on outside people's offices who go to work in a suit, because I don't know what it is, but they don't like doing it. So what you've got to look out for is, where did the letter of comfort come from? Because you know that something's going wrong with the accounts of that company. So if you look at it another way, if you were the parent or parent company who's given the guarantor's letter, if the firm doesn't really make any sense, the accounts don't make any sense, and you firewalled that firm because it's a limited company, let's not forget, why would you want to guarantor it? It doesn't kind of make sense in some ways that you would always want to, because if they don't have the money to sort of self-sustain, wouldn't you just want to sort of leave them to sort of crash and burn possibly? Do you see what I'm trying to say? Like, if you're going to guarantee them, wouldn't it be better just to give them like a loan to make their accounts add up? You see, because then there would be no need for a guarantee, and a guarantee obviously could run into a huge amount. It will make your insurance premium change for that firm, because you're now guaranteeing somebody else as well. So you've got to ask the question: if that firm has got the substance to pay for the lower firm, why wouldn't they just pay in some money? Now, if that's because it could be a huge amount of debt, then you've got to wonder, doesn't that mean possibly the parent company could have been put out of business by it? So that's something to think about. And I know it's a lot of variables, but just think about it. Just think about it a couple of times. You'll start seeing the picture unfold. Now, this is where it gets even more confusing. Not confusing if you see it for what it is, but in certain instances, the parent company guarantee is given by a company that you cannot satisfy the substance of. So, I'll give you an example. If it was an English company guaranteeing another English company, you could look on their company's house accounts and see if they made any sense. And like I said at the start, there is no proper regulation. And if you look at that, you've got to look at these, see if everything adds up. Again, the same thing. You could get some bent accountants just putting anything into the company's house. A lot of them will do this. They'll put a signature to it. You never know. You could find another letter of comfort attached to that firm. But one of the things that I found was, there was this company called Prime Overseas Property. Right now, they're a scam company they're a Ponzi scheme company, of which there are loads in England, and they dealt with property in different countries. And depending on who asked them, they'd say they've got loads of property on their books. Someone else asked them, they'd say we don't have any property on our books. We're purely an estate agent. They would have come out with all sorts of lies because they're criminals. They're based in Warrington, and they ripped off quite a lot of people, and of course, with them normally the prime target being old people, a lot of these people, really put them in a very bad situation at a late time of life. I knew this one guy, and he was so upset by getting ripped off by them and another firm who'd also ripped him off that he basically was on all this antidepressant medication after a very healthy life, and he fell over as a result of taking, obviously antidepressant medications, fluoride based. He fell over as a result of taking this because, it makes your brain not work properly, as you probably know. Hit his head and died. So he died as a result of this, indirectly. But he died broken-hearted. Didn't even like to get out of bed in the morning. So he had to take the anti-thinking medication to allow him to do anything. Very tragic story. So these things, there are lots of big victims to these. But the point is, in this instance, you've got Prime Overseas Property, a fraud company, a Ponzi scheme company, and you've got their accountants with Deloitte, the very, very big accountancy firm, Deloitte. Now, a guy called Alan Fendall, I believe he was working in the Liverpool office when he signed the accounts off, but he also worked in the Manchester office, so it's the northwest of England, not so far away from each other. Alan Fendall of Deloitte signed the accounts off as good, but he put in a letter of comfort from a company called Glinton Limited. Right now, Glinton Limited did not directly own Prime Overseas Properties, but it did own Club La Costa Group. So it was a parent company guarantee. Now, Glinton Limited were based in the Isle of Man, I believe, or it might have been Jersey, I forget, but I think it was the Isle of Man. The point is, in certain tax havens, you do not have to state who the director is of the firm, you do not have to say who the secretary is, and you do not have to say how much money is in the company. So he's basically signed the accounts off, grossly negligent, this is gross negligent, on the bit of paper from a firm where you can't establish who the director is. The secretary, I said you can't see who the secretary is because it can be a nominee's company. So it can be a company that just acts as a secretary and has no liability for anything. And you can't tell the substance of the firm. So the moral of the story is, if you are looking into the substance of a company, look out for these letters of comfort and guarantors letters, and then trace back where they're going. Because the whole point is, if you're dealing with bent professionals like Alan Fendall, who's quite happy to go and sign off accounts, basically fraudulently sign them off, definitely gross negligence, you can end up holding the baby. That Glinton Limited, it might be, the whole point is you don't know how much money it's got. So you don't even know whether it's a good idea to sue them or not. You see what I'm trying to say? Now, extending on to that particular point, Prime Overseas Property was taken to court by a lot of the victims. Now, I was looking into the matters that I've discussed on behalf of, and I found out about this as a result of doing a little bit of work on behalf of the old gentleman who died, hit his head because he'd been taking all his medication, and he was heartbroken, very, very depressing, and he's dead now. His wife and that she's not in a very good state since he's died either. So basically, we dropped it for various reasons. But the point is, it's very interesting to note that other victims of the fraud got in touch with me due to the fact I put an affidavit on the internet, which it's a proper sound affidavit. It was witnessed by a barrister. So it's a sworn affidavit explaining my experience with Prime, because I just wanted to tie up all my experience and say, look, fair enough, I did a load of work. It took me a long time. I found out loads of stuff about the company, but it was all going to come to nothing because the guy's dead and his wife's in a state because she's old and her husband's just died. It's all very sad. They've lost all their money and all that, very upsetting. So I basically dropped it. But the point is, I didn't want to leave my, if I had to spend another couple of days just getting sealing off my work rather than leaving probably what amounts about 2 months worth of work, just going nowhere. I wanted other people to be able to use it. And this guy phoned me up, again, a bit of a divvy. He'd lost all his money, and he goes, but that affidavit pertains to various letters you sent to them. I don't think we could use it in court unless you have those letters. Well, of course I fucking got the letters. Why? I'm using the affidavit to just bang it up there so people can look at it, and they can then, it's an affidavit, penalty of perjury. I've lied on it. It's just to make it convenient because, you've written lots of letters. You just take the good bits out of each one. I summarised them. It took 15 pages. Otherwise, it would have been sort of 100 pages. That's the only reason. But anyway, that being as it may, this guy had been persuaded by some solicitors and as a group action to take this lot to court. But instead of going for Deloitte, a massive accountancy firm who've got a massive legal team, because you need a big and massive legal team, just like Goldman Sachs does, because they're constantly doing bent stuff. Instead of taking them to court, they take to court the shitty little company that's run by a load of scumbags who've got no substance. So what you've got to realise is in life, always go for the professional indemnity insurance, go for the insurers, go for the big companies, go for the company who's got insurance. Don't go for some toe rag from Warrington who's, he probably, like you'd been probably stealing shopping trolleys in his previous job. They don't have any money. They're very dodgy. Don't go for them. Go for the company that signs their accounts off. And look out, if you're assessing the viability of a firm, look at the company's house accounts and look at things like letters of comfort. Accountancy is not difficult. If you look at companies' house accounts, they're extremely simple, right? It'll take you a little bit of time to get your head around them. Anyone can do it. It doesn't matter if you've got an IQ of 80 or you're 12 years old. You can do it. Do not believe it's difficult. It's not difficult. If it doesn't add up, it doesn't make sense, ask the question. If you ask the question and they start acting all funny, well, you've already got them, haven't you? Because there's a good reason. Otherwise, they'd just explain it. Any sarcasm in any responses, especially if they're written responses, I always would recommend that you write to people. Any sarcasm is a sign that they're trying to hide something. So just watch out for that. Thanks very much for listening. You can get hold of me at T0MCAHILL. That's my Skype name with a 0, not an O in Tom, or the same at hotmail.com. So that's T0MCAHILL at hotmail. I'm Tom Cahill. Thanks very much.